Hey everybody, welcome to Obscurities in Miniature. It is with great joy that I get to take a look at the pretty recent Magic Realms, the Art of Fighting fantasy book, which is a perfect capstone to a crazy hectic week with a nice taste of obscurities in literature. And hopefully this isn't too obscure, because, I don't know, if you're of a certain age, generation, mindset, and inclination towards all things genre specific, you probably spent some time with these books. And I would imagine that those of us on the more European side of things probably spent a little bit more time with these than my counterparts and myself here in the States. Don't get me wrong, I had quite a few fighting fantasy books myself. I was always a bit more of a Joe Deaver fan. I had all the Lone Wolf and Cub books. I really liked the Freeway Warrior stuff. I remember I had a couple of those. And I had all kinds of other books that have been lost in this hazy mist of nostalgia and childhood that I honestly don't know what they were. So, I mean, I grew up in the heyday of choose your own adventure books, and I've been trying my best to slowly try to get kids interested in reading them again. Sometimes the art is a bit dated, to say the least. But really, you know, for as much as we'd be checking those out begrudgingly from the school library, these were the books that were actually getting all of our free time and silent reading being spent with. But this book is really cool because, for the first thing, it really just breaks down each artist that is one of the major contributors, and we have some of the lesser known folks as well, which is kind of cool. And one of the things I really like about this is they get into some of the alternative covers, especially from different publishers, different editions, different countries, and I always really enjoy that kind of stuff. So, I mean, honestly, some of these pieces, and I love the fact that they give you a bit of a background on just about every single author in here. I mean, some of these I can remember seeing. I mean, if ever there was a quintessential character. Now, that's from the more recent ones, if I remember correctly. I feel like... And that's the crazy thing is, I mean, I've seen some of these illustrations so many times at this point, for so many years, I can't remember what's what. I mean, obviously, these are more recent ones, but it's cool that they pay homage to a lot of the older ones. What was it, the Island of the Lizard King? That looks a bit more new. And here's the best part about this book is I can't guarantee it probably doesn't have every single black and white line art illustration in them, but just the fact that they're included, I think, is really cool. Doesn't have every single piece of art in this book. No, but at 300 some odd pages, it's got a fair chunk. And I mean, that's really what's important. Also, the size of this book, it's a big one. So even though we unfortunately have these 4 to a page type setups for a lot of the line art on the inside, you know, it's just appreciated that it's there. Could it have been like 2 to a page or something? Sure. Will I take what I can get rather than none at all? Absolutely. And there are the occasional big full page spreads. I did not realize that Blanche had done a lot of these pieces, but then knowing the relationship between Jackson and what's his name, Livingston, right? I just always think of Steve Jackson. And of course, when I think of 80s, I start thinking of Joe Jackson and his early albums, but that's a whole different time, story, and place. Best save for another day. I can't help but deny just how specific of thoughts and feelings these types of images conjure up. I mean, some of them look pretty darn nostalgic. There's a good chance that I read some of these at some point. That's Freeway Fighter, I know that one. But just, you know, how many of these guys were doing illustrations for Games Workshop even at the time is pretty cool. And there's just some cool looking photos. And I want to say, didn't they originally make some designs for GW? Les Edwards, I'm like, when I think of some of these Pieces. His name is one that always pops in mind immediately. And I'm not very up on all of my British genre artists of the day. David Gallagher. I feel like he did do some old White Dwarf stuff, but I mean, it's just page after page. And this, to me, is the kind of book that you can just have out, you know, sitting on the table, sitting on the shelf, where somebody can grab it, and just open it up and flip through it. Maybe you've read all these books. If anything, you know, just the neatness of the illustrations really does it for me. Some of these look really familiar. I really wish that they told you which book they came from. Like, this looks incredibly familiar to me, and I have no idea why. Ellen Langford. I know that I had one book that was like a full-on Sinbad Arabian Nights set in like the Mediterranean, but like a very fantastical version of it. And you had to like keep track of your crew and stuff like that. Was this from the Lizard King? Maybe that's why it looks familiar. I know I had that book. I mean, some of these look really familiar. I remember one where you did have to go on the ocean. And you had to like keep track of stuff. I remember one that was in a city that got really confusing trying to figure out the way through it. I don't know if that rings a bell for anybody. I feel like it was one of the earlier books. I remember the PS1 Death Trap Dungeon game. You want to get oddly specific. It is kind of cool that some of the more modern stuff tends to have sketches and early designs. But I mean, just look at this. There's piles of this stuff. And it is nice to see that some of the newer artists are represented as well. I know I'm not getting into every name, every page, but with a book this size, that's honestly half the fun. It's not all the black and white pieces either. There is tons and tons of color in here. It just makes me crazy because it's like, so much of this is like, wow, this looks familiar. Have I seen it all on the internet before? Quite possibly. Citadel of Chaos sounds familiar too. I remember I had another series of books that was related to the Lone Wolf stuff. That was like with an alchemist or something, because you were always like picking herbs and you had to pick like your schools of magic. And there's like potion making and things like that. I don't remember what those were even called. And see, it's kind of cool. In the back here, we have like a lot of the other artists that maybe didn't have as much time spent with them. And here's where it gets really interesting, where you start to see artwork by artists from overseas. Specifically, a lot of these are like Brazilian, Polish. That's kind of neat. Like, I'm looking at these versions with the yellow wings like that of the dragon. These look familiar to me. But then again, I read so many of these types of books and owned so many, and unfortunately got rid of them all as I got older. I can't tell anymore what I had, which is a real shame. Now, these do not look familiar right here. I do not remember these editions, so this is definitely beyond my time. The Scholastic ones, however, I absolutely own. Some of these I do own, and one of these days, I feel like the ones I have all had these kind of monotone, monochromatic colors. Monotone, that's not the right word, that's my voice at the moment. I don't remember ones like this. I feel like they all were like those. Could just be me. It's funny going through the overseas editions, and then there's like... This one looks familiar too, with this setup of the cover. And especially the tagline like that. Maybe it was City of Thieves I'm thinking of. interesting, very modern take on some of the covers. And this is kind of cool. It's just all the various editions of the first book, The Warlock of Firetop Mountain. It's funny how childish some look and how like dark and gritty other versions are. No, I've got this version. My son actually, I found it on his shelf. I don't know where it came from. I feel like it was a pre-order through like GameStop or one of those companies if you ordered their 3DS version. And I feel like that was like a 3D dungeon crawl or something, but I was more interested in the book at the time. I have not seen the game book versions in a long, long time. I'm trying to remember. I can recall finding some at one of the bookstores near the train station that I always take going into Niigata at Nagaoka. I can't remember which versions, but this one looks familiar to me. I could be totally off base. It's funny just how many different Japanese versions of the Warlock of Firetop Mountain there are. Not only that, but then they all have different covers. It's kind of funny. I remember hearing about Warlock magazine. One of the first times I ever went to England, I remember trying to scope out all of the various magazines. If there was anything that the British seemed to love in the 90s and late 80s, it was various magazines at the newsstand. And me and my brother, we used to just go nuts trying to grab as many different ones. I know somewhere in my parents' house, he's got like a complete run of Deadline when that was the thing. Basically anything Pat Mills was doing back in the 80s and 90s, my brother was all over. I started grabbing a bunch of the manga ones where they were like republishing a lot of early Studio Proteus stuff. The Troll Tooth War. I don't even know what this stuff is. And then it's even kind of cool. We have a whole little thing on... Who made these? Was it Atlantis? Yeah, it was Atlantis. I feel like they did have stuff back in the day from GW as well, and it would have been cool to have those in here just for the heck of it. Nice photography of the figures, though. Definitely better than I ever did. Let me get a quick breakdown of all the various books, the authors, and a very detailed index. And sadly, a Kickstarter backer list of names, of which, unfortunately, mine is not in there. I did keep an eye on this one and really wanted to back it at the time, but being a public school teacher, hey, I ain't made of money despite how much crazy stuff I tend to have on this channel. Believe it or not, folks, I do tend to live a pretty frugal life after all. My biggest vice, obviously, is tabletop and model building. So I don't have a lot of other things that suck up a lot of money, other than my children, but yeah. Anyway. Definitely a cool book if you ever experience any of these. If any of the things I mentioned sound familiar, I used to have so many of these. Interplanetary Spy, me and my cousins, I think we owned the entire series of those. I think it was called Being Interplanetary Spy or Intergalactic Spy or something like that. But it had this very, like, late Warren magazine, like, Spanish, Philippine art style to it. If I can even describe it as that. It was different. I liked those books, and every book was by a different artist for the most part. We owned most of those. I had a bunch of weird, like, sci-fi ones. Some of them had really messed up endings, but that was half the fun of those types of books. And that's half the fun of these. Any recommendations for modern ones? I know of a couple out there, but I'm totally curious if you guys are into these types of books. Any recommendations, especially if you have any good recommendations, modern stuff for kids. I am all ears. I do tend to see what's out there and available, at least in terms of what's appropriate for school. Unfortunately, for as much as I love this stuff, yeah, I can see some parents getting uppity about the fact if I started bringing these books in. But wouldn't be the first time I slipped something interesting onto the shelves. And no, I don't mean anything horrible, but yeah. Anyways, we'll let it go at that. So that said then, this has been High Lord Tamerlane with Obscurities in Miniature saying thanks for watching, and we'll see you back here soon. Bye-bye.